good friend, both of our friends, Matt Barrows from The Athletic, interviewed Patrick Mahomes' quarterback coach, the quarterback guru, Jeff Christensen, who's worked with, a lot of different quarterbacks, but spent time in Dallas this offseason working with Trey Lance and Patrick Mahomes. And Christensen, interesting piece. He told Matt that he can generally diagnose what's wrong with a quarterback's delivery within one day of working with a quarterback. He knows what the issue usually is. But with Trey Lance, it took 4 days. And this report I thought was really interesting because Christensen said that Lance's retooled motion eliminated his ongoing arm fatigue, which kind of confirms that story. I think originally broken by Mike Silver, which I thought was preposterous at the time, but now it sounds like it was actually legitimate that Lance had ongoing arm fatigue, largely due to his mechanics. And I guess the arm fatigue is something that's plagued Trey ever since his first training camp with the Niners. So Barrows is reporting that by the time Christensen and Lance worked out, by the time they were done working out together and working on his motion, that Lance went from needing to take a day off after every 3 days of intense workouts to waking up one day and the arm soreness was gone. It was no longer an issue. And I guess Christensen found the root of the issue. Lance's accuracy, I guess, has since improved. His spin on the football has improved. And they're saying his delivery time has become shorter. Christensen credited Lance with being, eager to learn and to push himself through, a difficult phase of learning and trying to adapt. The quote he had that I thought was interesting: it's a different feeling. It can be kind of weird, and it all can be kind of scary. And so it's a whole different feeling when the ball leaves your finger. To his credit, he slowly kept applying and kept believing. He's really fit right in. Talking about Patrick Mahomes, he said Pat really thinks the world of him. He's just a really good person, conscientious. He wants to be great, and he's one of the few kids whose actions match his words. He backs it up. He shows up every day. He wants to learn, and that's why I teach him. And then Christensen finished up by saying that, quote, he was 25% ahead of where I thought he would be, referring to Lance, by the time they finished. And then he went on to say he thought he could be incredible in Kyle's offense. And, who knows? Maybe Lance will go back to Christensen after the OTAs and continue to work and get better. And then, it's just good to see that, what we already knew, that Trey's got great work ethic, great desire, and we all know he has natural athletic ability. The question is, did Christensen unlock something in the quarterback that will now, be a substantial development? What do you think?
That's what the 49ers need to hope, right?
Yeah.
We've seen this before. There's no quarterback guru that's going to come back out after and say, yeah, I worked with this guy and he sucks.
Right.
So that's not going to happen. But the nice part about this for Lance is that you're hearing this from Christensen, but you've also heard it, and I think Matt Barrows pointed this out in his piece. You also have heard that from the 49ers. Kyle Shanahan mentioned, that he's looked better. He's looked, I think what he said was he's the best he's looked since they've had him, I think is what he said during the Dwight Clark event. So what Christensen's saying and what Shanahan's saying, that's good. And it's all pointing in the right direction for Trey Lance in terms of his motion and what we're hearing. I think and that's good. So just kind of keeping it on the positive tip, it's all in a positive direction as far as his motion and the way it looks today.
Right. Yeah. But here's the other part of this. And, there was a terrific piece in The Athletic a few years ago that I looked up this week. How much can a quarterback prospect's throwing mechanics really be changed? And this question was being discussed in 2019. And here was a quote from Kyle Shanahan. If a guy throws a certain way, and you think we're going to teach him at age 23 to throw it differently, he might do it in practice and might do it in drills. But you throw him into an NFL game in the heat of a battle, and he's going to resort to who he is and what he's always done. So that seems to be almost like Shanahan saying, you know what? I don't believe in the development, that curve that potentially happens between 19 and 23. But is that maybe just a general thought on quarterbacks? Is it possible that Lance is kind of the exception to the rule simply because of the fact that he's only thrown 400 passes since high school, that he really only had 1 year of competitive football since high school? Do you think that maybe, Kyle's thoughts are his thoughts, but maybe that maybe Lance is the exception to the rule? What do you think?
And again, that's where the 49ers need to hope, right? They need to hope that he will be the exception to the rule. I put this out on Twitter earlier today, and a lot of people are bringing up examples. And yes, you can point to Josh Allen. Josh Allen is an exception to the rule. He is a guy that has definitely improved. There's others that haven't. I think in that same article, the one that really sticks out to me was the quote later on from Saints head coach, well, now with Denver, Sean Payton, where he said, I'd be a little guarded if we're going to improve the mechanics so that he can be more accurate. That would make me a little more nervous than he's accurate, but his mechanics are a little different. And then he goes on to point to, Phillip Rivers, who at the time, who was a very accurate quarterback, but had one of the goofiest looking motions that you could think of when it came to a quarterback. So it's a little bit of both.
He's pushing back. He's pushing back, saying you can't really change emotion to make a guy more accurate. You can take a guy who's already accurate and try to tweak his motion, is what he's saying.
Well, what he's saying is, even if it doesn't, he's saying basically what he's saying is if the guy's already accurate, he's going to be accurate. The change of throwing motion isn't necessarily going to be what makes a quarterback accurate. Quarterbacks, there's different all times of things that go into this. And the biggest piece with what Shanahan said, and that's why, I said we'll have to wait and see if Lance is the exception, is because he can look really good right now. He can look really good during OTAs when there's no live bullets around him, when it's 7-on-7. But what happens when you put an offensive and defensive line in front of him and he's getting pressure? And we'll see. The traits of Trey Lance can't be debated. We know that he has a big arm. We know that he's a hard worker. We know that he's a smart guy. We know all these things about him. But every quarterback that's ever been taken in the first round has those types of traits. That's why they're taken in the first round. So we'll see. Can he develop it? Can he get better? He's going to get a lot of reps this offseason. If he can stay healthy through training camp and all those kinds of things, there's a potential that he can win this job and be the guy. It's just a matter of him realizing the potential that the 49ers saw in him when they drafted him number 3 overall back in 2021.
I would say if you're in the camp of, wow, this is real positive, I think you're in the right camp. If you're in the camp of, oh, you know what? Now Trey Lance is going to be absolutely phenomenal. That's probably where I would say, you know what? I think what this is going to guarantee is that he's throwing with his proper mechanics, as far as he won't have that arm fatigue. That's one. Sounds like it's already going in that direction. I also think he's going to throw a much better ball. You know what I mean? As far as a better spiral, a more consistent spiral, less of the high-speed wobble ducks, which with his arm strength, arm speed, and power, when he throws a duck, it's worse than sometimes a lesser armed quarterback who throws a duck, because the wobble is so wild. You know what I mean? So if he throws a better, cleaner spiral, I think that's going to help his football become more catchable. I think you're going to have it's going to lower his drop rate and hopefully improve his accuracy. But overall, I think accuracy has a lot to do also with the ball coming out on time. And the one thing about Purdy that was so impressive this last year was not just the accuracy. It was the accuracy, touch, and timing. The three elements together. The accuracy, the unbelievable touch to fit it in over defenders, under defenders, in tight windows. But it also was the ball came out on time. And that's really, I thought, in the slants and in the shorter routes, the short game, that's where I thought Purdy really was almost a perfect fit for Shanahan's system, simply because if you throw the slant at the proper time, you can avoid the receiver taking a big hit. and we saw him make those adjustments. And you didn't see Brandon Ayuk take big hits, or really any of his receivers take huge hits on those in-breaking routes and the slants, because he threw it with the proper timing in addition to touch and accuracy. So to me, it all goes together. I think this is going to improve Trey's overall throwing mechanics, his health of his elbow, his shoulder, his arm. But I think it's also going to give him a tighter spiral, more consistent spiral, and make his ball more catchable, drop the drop percentage. But still, I still got to see the touch and the timing and the variety of throws. But still, very, very positive news for sure. And if there is one guy who I think could be the exception to Kyle's rule of, hey, look, by the time you're 23, you're developed, it could be this kid. Why? Because he is so inexperienced, and yet he's so talented and wants it so much that I think he's going to make the adjustments. Now, I think what Kyle's saying is, when the live bullets are flying and you're out there by yourself and taking that drop, and here come defensive linemen, you're going to resort back to whatever it was that you have the muscle memory with. So that's going to be on Trey to see if he can kind of reteach himself different muscle memory while still operating in this highly pressurized situation. But overall, I would say this is the most positive Lance related story that I've seen of the offseason. Where do you rank this? Am I overreacting?
No, I don't think you're overreacting. I think that it's a really positive. It's really positive news that his motion, this along with what we heard from Kyle Shanahan, you kind of start putting it all together. It sounds like he's looking really good, and that's really positive. I think on top of that, if you want to talk about the other positives, him attending Tight End U this year and actually going and participating is a big positive, because again, you already hit on it. The more reps, he needs throws. He needs to keep working, and the more throws that he gets, the better this stuff gets ingrained in him. It's a little bit harder when you're in your 20s and when you're a teenager, to really get this stuff all down and have it dialed in. It's kind of like anything else. That's why I think it was Grant who's talked about how by the time somebody gets to a certain age, they're already who they're going to be. So we'll see, and this is all positive. And then you get him out to Tight End U, and he gets to work with George Kittle, and I would expect to see a lot too, and the other tight ends from the 49ers out there as well. And he's working with tight ends from across the NFL. I think all that stuff could be a big positive for him. And then we'll see if once you get to July and August, once you get the pass rush in front of him in training camp and all that, can he continue that? And that'll be the next step. And but for now, it's trending in the positive direction for Trey Lance.
No question. And it makes OTAs that much more juicy to watch coming up.